Hi everyone, I'm Simon, and I'm a senior at USC studying human biology.
Hey everyone, my name's Anatosh, and I'm a senior at USC with JEP.
Hi everyone, I'm Terry, and I'm a senior studying human biology.
Hi guys, my name's Cassandra and I'm a junior at USC.
Hey everyone, hope you're ready to exercise your brains, because today we're going to be talking about proteins and the body. As a quick overview, we'll be starting off by talking about what proteins are and what they're made of, and then we'll go into how proteins get digested, then where we can get proteins, and lastly, why they're so important. So, the first question we have, what are proteins? Proteins are big, complex molecules found in every living thing. They're how our bodies are built and how it functions. Carbohydrates and fats may be fuels, but proteins are what we're made of. Our bodies don't burn proteins unless they have no other choice, unlike carbs and fats. Now, while proteins may be our body's building blocks, they themselves are made up of smaller components called amino acids. Now, what are amino acids, you may ask? They're special molecules made up of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. Putting amino acids together makes a chain that has special properties based on what kinds of amino acids make it up. If you're familiar with acids and bases, amino acids can be acidic, basic, polar, and nonpolar. Now, once all the amino acids are linked together in a chain, they start to twist and fold into each other. And once it finishes, it's ready to do the job its structure allows it to do. Now, where do we find these proteins and amino acids? Well, first off, we find them in our bodies. They make up everything you see here. And the thing is, proteins are actually made by our bodies too. If you've heard of DNA, that's what tells our cells to make enzymes based on the instructions in our DNA. They use those basic elements, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, and oxygen, to make amino acids. And those get matched together in the proper order to make all the proteins we need to function. Well, now you might be asking, if we make our own proteins, why do we need to eat them in our food? Well, that's because our bodies actually don't make all the amino acids we need. While there are about 20 normal amino acids, our bodies can't make 9 of them. That's why we need to get them from our diets. These amino acids are called essential amino acids. The proteins get broken down into amino acids that our bodies can absorb and use to make proteins for us. Now, the big question is, how much do we need to eat? Well, most advice says about 10 to 35% of our daily intake should be made up of proteins. That sounds like quite a bit, but most of us actually meet this amount in our daily diets. But what happens if you don't have enough? Because proteins are our body's building blocks, not having them can actually hurt your health. You won't be able to make things that your body needs to survive. The biggest problem associated with not having enough protein is bone loss, which can lead to osteoporosis and fractures. Well, on the other hand, if we eat too much, then, well, the jury's still out. It's not really clear what eating too much protein can do to someone healthy, but if you're someone at risk for health problems, you can have a host of issues, including damage to your kidneys. And because proteins are found in things like meat and other animal products, there is a risk of eating too much fat along with your protein, which can be bad for your heart.
Okay, so let's get started. So we just learned about what proteins are and what they're made of, but let's try to figure out now how are they digested and how does the body use proteins. And so first let's start with general digestion. So digestion in general is how we break large food objects down into smaller molecules that our body can use. And so that's the big process of digestion, breaking down big things into small things that our body can use to power us and to energize us. And this happens throughout the body. So let's look at this image right here. And this is basically a picture of someone's body. And we can see here, here's the mouth. And then we can trace it down through the esophagus, which is the throat, to the stomach, small intestine, and then the large intestine. And so these different organs are basically all very important for digestion to happen. And so digestion happens throughout the body. And so here we can see the protein digestion. It can actually start in the mouth. So breaking down protein can happen when you start chewing food. And so this man here is chewing his apple, and that's breaking down, say, protein. And then cooking also breaks down protein. So even before we start eating, the cooking actually will help break down some of the proteins in the food before we even get to them. And also going down through this image, so we just did the mouth, and now going down to the stomach and the small intestine, we can go to this slide here. So stomach has acid, and acid in our stomach helps us digest proteins. And so here's a picture of a stomach inside someone's body, and basically the stomach has acid that helps us digest proteins. And so again, the acid's helping break down big molecules into smaller molecules. And then here, the small intestine is very important for digestion in general, and especially for proteins. The small intestine has enzymes, and enzymes help break down large chemicals into smaller chemicals. And if you remember that chemicals really make up all the food we eat, and so breaking down large chemicals into small chemicals is really the same thing as breaking down large food objects into small things that our body can use. And the small intestine is also really useful, not just for breaking down small or big things into small things, but also for absorbing. So we need to absorb all these nutrients into our body, and the small intestine does a really good job of absorbing all the nutrients that proteins provide us. And so it's super important to eat nutrients like proteins, and it's also really important that you know how it's digested.
All right, now that you guys know what proteins are and how we digest them, I'm going to be here to tell you about where we can find some very good sources of protein. Protein is very important for body functions. They are what our muscles are made up of, and they also act as a source of emergency energy in case that we are in a starvation mode or we haven't found any other carbohydrates or fats to eat. So let's get started then. Here are some great sources of everyday protein. These I've picked just because they are very common and you guys probably have a lot of it in your house. So the first one is eggs. Eggs, especially the egg whites, it can give you a very good amount of protein. Same with chicken breast. As you can tell, it's meat, and meat is the protein. Same with the beef and the pork. Now, oats also have a lot of protein in them, surprisingly enough, even though they are not meat. Same with Greek yogurt. Now, Greek yogurt is one of my favorite sources of protein because one, it's easy to eat. You just open the can and you can just eat it. And two, there's a lot of protein inside of it. Now, you're asking yourself, what about vegetarians? How can they get enough protein for their body? And here, I've listed out some good similar vegetarian options in case you want to check how much protein you're eating. So the first one, we have soy. All products of soy, like tofu, soybeans, or soy milk, they have a lot of protein inside them and are very nutritious. Same with a lot of grains, nuts, and seeds. Now, each grains, nuts, and seeds all have different amounts of proteins, but as long as you eat enough of them, I'm sure that you will be healthy enough with your options here. All right, now let's move on to complete proteins. What are complete proteins? A complete protein source is something that contains enough amounts of all 9 different types of amino acids that our body cannot produce. Let's do a quick refresher on what amino acids are. These are what proteins are made up of, and our body can produce a lot of them without help, but there are 9 that our body specifically cannot make. So we have to get these 9 different types of amino acids from the foods that we eat. And we have to eat them in order to build protein for our muscles and other body functions. Now, here are some good sources of complete proteins. So eggs, like I mentioned earlier, eggs, poultry, which is another word for chicken and other birds, bird meat, and beef, they all have complete protein sources. That means that if you eat them, you will be good for all the different types of amino acids. Same with quinoa, hemp seed, and soy. Now, these are your vegetarian options for good complete proteins. Now, can you think of any other good sources of proteins that you personally eat? This is a good question to ask just so you have the mindset to find the right amount of protein to eat.
So now I'm going to talk a little bit about why it's important for us to eat proteins. Well, we can't really survive without eating proteins, and here's the reason why. You can think of proteins like they're the building blocks that make up our body. So they're going to help us make up our bones, our muscles, any of the tissues in our organs. And I put the lungs here, but really any of the other organs that you guys can think of, proteins are going to help make that up. And also things that you can see on the outsides of our bodies. So things like our skin, hair, and nails. But being our building blocks is only one function of proteins. As you can see here, proteins also help us maintain and repair things in our body. Really, proteins are part of almost every cellular process that you guys can think of. Some of those include repairing cells that might be damaged, forming our blood cells, and also in our immune response, which helps our bodies fight when we get sick. And of course, proteins help out with your metabolism and are a source of energy for our bodies. So for every gram of proteins that you're eating, that you're getting about 4 calories of energy to keep you active. So you can see why protein is important. And protein is especially important for you guys because that's what keeps your bodies on track for growing and developing to be healthy and strong. With that said, that wraps up our video. Thank you guys for watching.